In this video, we will be introducing you to the JavaScript programming language. The agenda for this video is as follows. We will be talking about what JavaScript is and its components, cover some of its background, talk about its structure, and subsequently we'll talk about the basics of the JavaScript language. So what is JavaScript? First of all, we need to understand that JavaScript is not related to Java. JavaScript was developed at a time when Java was very popular. Java is still very popular, and what JavaScript wanted to do, or the developers that were developing the JavaScript language wanted to do, was to ride the bandwagon of Java, and subsequently the created language that they were using at that time, they referred to as JavaScript. JavaScript is a scripting language. It's not a full-fledged programming languages like Java, C, C#, Swift, so on and so forth. JavaScript is considered a scripting language, and it runs on the client's web browser. Subsequently, JavaScript controls most web client behavior, and so it is used for web client programming. JavaScript is implemented in most of the popular web browsers that we use nowadays. JavaScript is implemented in browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Internet Explorer, or Edge as they now call it. And so it is a web client scripting language. Now, in the recent past, JavaScript has moved from client-side programming to a little bit of server-side scripting using in the form of React and so forth. But this is a new development. JavaScript's primary use still is in web client programming. Some of the characteristics of JavaScript are that it is a loosely typed language. This is in contrast to strongly typed languages. Now, one way to distinguish a loosely typed language versus a strongly typed language is to compare JavaScript's namesake, Java. In Java, when you have variables, you actually have to declare the type of the variable. If you remember from other classes that you might have taken, when you are declaring variable types in Java, you have to declare the data type like string or integer or double, and then refer to the variable name. JavaScript, on the other hand, is a loosely typed language where your variables don't actually have a specific data type. JavaScript is an interpreted language rather than a compiled language like Java. JavaScript is interpreted at the client end, at the browser, and subsequently JavaScript is pretty lightweight. It's fairly easy to get down to the client and to interpret. Some uses of JavaScript, and there are lots of uses of JavaScript, but some common uses are typically for input validations, emails, passwords, things that one might normally expect in forms. JavaScript does get used for calculations, also to handle a variety of user events and the way a user might interact with the web page, whether it be on a laptop, a desktop, on a mobile device, on a phone. User event handling is one of the more popular uses of JavaScript. Control of the browser and browser behavior is one of the uses of JavaScript. AJAX, or asynchronous JavaScript, is one of the domains in which JavaScript became very popular early on. And asynchronous JavaScript is where you start filling out a form and there is automatic data that's being populated. That is asynchronous JavaScript. And that's a very popular use of JavaScript to communicate with a server-side script while something is going on at the client end, to give that rich user interaction. Is a very common use of JavaScript. And more recently, local storage is a big part of the use of JavaScript as well. Now, some background about JavaScript. JavaScript was initially known as LiveScript, and this was back in the late 1990s. But again, it was very hard to popularize a script known as LiveScript, and so the developers at that point in time took from Java the word Java and renamed LiveScript JavaScript. Um, and once JavaScript started becoming popular, it got renamed to ECMAScript, and there have been various versions of ECMAScript over time, and new features and functionality are constantly being added to it. The current version of ECMAScript is ECMAScript version 6. Uh, and ECMAScript version 6 is slightly different from previous versions of JavaScript. It has a lot of new features and functionality, like arrow functions and so on and so forth. And we will take a look at some of these new features of ECMAScript once we actually start moving into React, because React employs some of these new features of ECMAScript in it. The structure of JavaScript. JavaScript is composed of three parts: ECMAScript, the document object model, and the browser object model. ECMAScript is the JavaScript language itself. It is the scripting portion, it's the programmatic portion of JavaScript. The document object model basically describes either HTML, XHTML, or XML documents. This is a standardized structure of a web page that one might find. It's the way one might manipulate and refer to different elements that one sees on a HTML web page through the use of ECMAScript. And finally, the browser object model. The browser object model refers to objects exposed by the browser. Now, obviously, this is browser dependent. Some browsers might have local storage components. Browser elements exposed could be extensions, different capabilities of the browser, different elements of the browser that might refer to specific characteristics of the device or of the user. To write JavaScript, you don't really need that many tools. All you really need is a text or HTML editor and a web browser. If you have just those two things, you could write JavaScript. But there are also some professional development tools that are available. For instance, you could use Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text, which are integrated development environments that allow us to write JavaScript and other types of code as well. But they can be used to write JavaScript as well. There are lots of resources and there's a lot of material online. A Google search will pull up a lot of material for JavaScript. It's one of the most popular programming and scripting languages out there. And so there's a lot of information available on JavaScript. And here are some resources that you might want to employ. Now, creating a JavaScript script is actually pretty easy. Just like HTML relies on tags, we have to write JavaScript within these script tags. You can have an opening script tag and a closing script tag, and within these script tags, you actually write your JavaScript. There has to be a type attribute for those script tags, and you'd have to specify text slash JavaScript in the tag as a type to indicate that it is in fact JavaScript. One might also use no script tags in case the browser does not support JavaScript. Sometimes users might have a setting that disables JavaScript, and in case JavaScript is disabled or not present, what action should the browser take? You may be able to specify that within the use of no script tags. So where do you write your JavaScript? Well, JavaScript is actually embedded in the HTML. It is part of the HTML document that the web browser downloads. And you can have it in multiple locations in that web page. First of all, you can have it typically within the header tags. Within the header tags of HTML document, you could have your script tags, and within that script tag, you can actually have your JavaScript. But if you wanted to, you could also have your script and closed script tags within the body tags as well. You can also have it inline with different elements. So lots of different places you can actually put your JavaScript code. In fact, you can also have your JavaScript off in a separate file, and in that case, your script tags would have a source location where it's going to get the JavaScript code. Please note that if you have your JavaScript in an external file, you have to have a .js extension. There are pros and cons to each approach, obviously, because a web browser renders content on the web page top down. That means from the first line that it encounters to the last line. If your JavaScript is up front, the web browser is going to parse the JavaScript up front first. Now, this becomes important if you have a lot of JavaScript. And so even if you have your JavaScript in an external file, but the JavaScript is extensive, it actually takes some time for the client to download that JavaScript. And so depending on the size and the purpose of your JavaScript, you might actually want to have your script tags at the end of the document, depending on the size of it. Now, while we are writing JavaScript, it is important to comment code, and this is one of the easy things one can do is comment code, take notes, and just basically highlight your code and mark it up so that other individuals can read your code and make sure it's documented well. You can comment code by using line and block comments, and you see different ways of doing that. Now, the syntax of JavaScript is based on C, C++, and Java. It is, in fact, case sensitive, and that's one of the things that one needs to always keep an eye out. If you've ever worked with a case sensitive language before, it is very, very important. Semicolons do come at the end of statements. It is considered best practice, but it's not always required. JavaScript is a curly brace language, and so we are going to be using curly braces, curly brackets to identify blocks of codes. The variables that we use in JavaScript, we are going to have a naming convention for them. One does not necessarily have to use this naming convention, but I personally do like a naming convention. The naming convention I'm going to be having is that it's going to be camel cased. Variables cannot begin with a number, and you cannot use operators as part of variable names. You cannot have punctuation or spaces in your variable names, and your variable names cannot be any keywords of the JavaScript language. Variables are dynamically typed, and what dynamic typing really means is that while one might start by storing a string in a variable, you can very easily change that variable from a string data type to an integer data type by just changing what is stored in it. And so variable types change based on what data is stored in the variable. And you don't always have to declare your variable before you actually use it. One can declare variables with a var, let, and constant keywords. Some of these allow you to declare global variables versus function-specific variables. As more work is done in JavaScript, more examples of the different ways of declaring variables will be seen. The initial values for variables are undefined. While one might not need to declare data types for variables, and variables are in fact dynamically typed, the loosely defined variable types include undefined, and really undefined is any variable that has been declared but not initialized. Variables can be null, Boolean, string variables, and string variables need to have opening and closing quotes. You can have number variables, and within number variables, it's integer and double precision. And finally, objects. You can also have objects in JavaScript. The scope of the variables can either be global or local. The global scope is a variable that is available to maybe all parts of the script, so different functions within the script. Local variables are variables that exist for only a specific function. As we said, JavaScript is case sensitive and semicolon closes the statements, and it is a curly based language. Now, like most other programming languages, there are conditional statements using if-else statements, and one can also have complex conditions using and or operators. One can also have nested if statements, like other programming languages if you have familiarity with other programming languages. There's also a switch operator that is available within JavaScript. A switch operator allows you to evaluate multiple conditions. Loops are also present within JavaScript. Again, like most other programming languages, JavaScript allows you to perform repetitive operations. While statements and for statements can get used in JavaScript to perform repetitive operations. One of the most important aspects of JavaScript are functions. Most of the JavaScript that we write will be in the form of functions. And functions are basically reusable code. They allow us to encapsulate distinct pieces of functionality that we can reuse over multiple pages, over multiple elements of a HTML document. Think of functions like methods if you're familiar with Java. A method can be invoked multiple times, allows us to do many things. And so functions are declared in JavaScript using the function keyword, where you specify the name of the function, and within the curly braces that follow, the instructions that you want that function to execute. Now, functions may take arguments and may also return information. The arguments or parameters that a function takes as input are local in scope. Functions can return information. They can return Boolean. They can return values. And actually in ECMAScript, a function can actually return other functions. So, but we'll take a look at this later. But functions are some of the most important parts of JavaScript, and we will take a look at some of the ways functions get used. So this was a short introduction to some key ideas within JavaScript to get us acquainted with some of the peculiarities of JavaScript, but also to kind of ground us in some of the features and functionality that JavaScript shares with other programming languages. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.